You're closer than you think. Whatever you're searching for, whatever breakthrough you're waiting for, whatever shift you believe is still years away, it's right there. Not in some distant future. Not after you do more work or figure everything out or become someone different. Right now, this moment, you're already standing at the threshold. You just don't recognize it yet. This is the strange thing about transformation. The gap between where you are and where you want to be is almost never as big as it seems. Most of the time, there's no gap at all. You're already there. You've already arrived. But you're looking so hard for the destination that you can't see you're standing in it. You're searching for something you already have, waiting for something that's already happened, preparing for something you've already become. Think about the last time something clicked for you, some understanding that changed everything. In the moment before it clicked, where were you? You were exactly where you needed to be. All the pieces were in place. All the understanding was already there, just below the surface. And then something shifted. Some tiny adjustment in perspective. And suddenly you could see it. You didn't go anywhere. You didn't acquire anything new. You just recognized what was already true. That's what closer than you think means. It's not about distance. It's not about time. It's about recognition. About finally seeing what's been there all along. About the tiny shift in awareness that changes everything without changing anything at all. Most people spend their lives thinking they're far from where they need to be. They look at themselves and see all the work left to do, all the healing that hasn't happened yet. It's all the growth still required, all the understanding they haven't achieved. And because they see themselves as far away, they stay far away. Not because the distance is real, but because they're convinced it is. But here's what actually happens when you look closely. The things you think you need to become, you already are them. The understanding you're seeking, already yours. The peace you're chasing, already here. The only thing missing is your recognition of these facts. You're not far from home. You're already home. You just haven't noticed yet. This shows up everywhere once you start seeing it. Someone spends years in therapy trying to heal trauma. And then one day, they realise the healing already happened. They don't know when. They can't point to the moment. But somewhere along the way, without them noticing, the wound closed. They were healed long before they recognised they were healed. They were waiting to feel different, but the difference had already occurred. Or someone works for years on a creative project, thinking they're nowhere near finished, thinking they have so much further to go. And then one day they look at it fresh and realise it's done. It's been done. Maybe for months. They were just so focused on the imagined future version that they couldn't see the completed version right in front of them. Or someone struggles with a problem for weeks, trying everything, getting nowhere, convinced the solution is impossibly far away. And then often when they stop trying, the answer just appears. Not because it suddenly arrived, but because it was always there. They were just looking past it, looking too hard, looking for something more complicated than what was actually needed. You're closer than you think, always, in everything. This isn't motivation. This isn't positive thinking. This is just how it works. The final step is always smaller than you imagine. The last piece is always simpler than you expect. The breakthrough is always nearer than it seems, because most of the journey happens before you realise you're on a journey. Most of the transformation happens before you notice you're transforming. By the way, our shared space of light and awareness is on its way to 100,000 people. Thank you to everyone who subscribes and brings this moment closer. So why does it feel so far? Why, if you're already close, does it seem like miles remain? Because you're comparing where you are to some fantasy version of the destination. You're not measuring actual distance. You're measuring the gap between reality and imagination. And that gap is infinite, because imagination is infinite. You can always imagine something more, something better, something further. But the actual destination, the real transformation you need, is never as far as the fantasy version. It's usually right here, usually just a hair's breadth away. Usually so close that the only thing keeping you from it is the belief that it must be farther. You're standing on the shore, looking for the shore. You're home searching for home. You've arrived, but you're still travelling, because you think arrival should look different than it does. This is why people can spend decades searching and never find what they're looking for, and then suddenly, without warning, without doing anything special, they find it. Or more accurately, they recognise they were standing in it the whole time. Nothing changed externally. Everything changed internally. The shift wasn't in location. It was in seeing. And here's the part that makes this both frustrating and liberating. You can't force this recognition. You can't make yourself see what you're not ready to see. You can't decide to suddenly recognise. You've already arrived. If you could, you would have already. The recognition comes when it comes. But knowing that you're closer than you think, knowing that the gap might be smaller than it seems, knowing that you might already be standing in the answer, that creates space for recognition to happen. It stops you from constantly running forward. It makes you pause and actually look at where you are instead of where you think you should be. And in that pause, in that actual looking, recognition becomes possible. You might see that you're not as far as you thought. You might notice that some of the change you were waiting for has already occurred. You might realise that the person you're trying to become is already here, just wearing clothes you didn't expect. The truth is, most people reach their destination and walk right past it because it doesn't match what they imagined. They get the healing, but don't recognise it as healing because they thought healing would feel different. They achieve the growth, but don't acknowledge it as growth because they imagined growth would be more dramatic. They find the answer, but dismiss it as too simple because they assumed the answer would be complex. You're closer than you think means you might already be there and just not know it. It means the thing you're searching for might be in your hand while you're looking everywhere else. It means the transformation you're waiting for might have already happened and you're just catching up to recognizing it. This completely changes how you approach everything. Instead of constantly pushing forward, you start actually checking where you are. Instead of assuming you're far from the goal, you investigate whether you might already be close. Instead of dismissing present reality because it doesn't match your fantasy of the future, you look closely at present reality to see what's actually here. And when you do this, you find things. You find progress you didn't notice you'd made. You find understanding you didn't realise you'd gained. You find strength you didn't know you'd developed. You find pieces of the destination scattered through your present reality, not off in some imagined future. You also stop wasting energy. Stop spinning your wheels. Stop trying to get somewhere you've already reached. When you recognise how close you actually are, you can make the final adjustments needed instead of tearing everything down and starting over. You can take the small step instead of the giant leap. You can finish instead of constantly beginning. There's a particular feeling that comes with recognising you're closer than you thought. It's not exactly relief, though. There's some of that. It's more like the surprise of suddenly understanding a joke you heard years ago. The joke hasn't changed. You've changed. Your understanding caught up. And suddenly what was opaque is transparent. What was impossible is obvious. What was far is here. That's the feeling you're looking for. Not the feeling of finally arriving after a long journey. The feeling of realising you arrived long ago and just didn't notice. Of discovering the treasure was in your pocket the whole time while you were searching the world for it. Of seeing that the door you thought was locked was actually open. You just hadn't tried turning the handle. This is why teachers often seem cryptic. Why they say things like you already know, or it's right in front of you, or stop looking. And you'll find it. Not because they're being mysterious for the sake of mystery, but because they can see that the person is standing at the edge of breakthrough and doesn't realise it. They can see the answer is already there. They can see the transformation has already occurred. They're just waiting for recognition to catch up. And the frustrating part is they can't give you that recognition. They can't make you see what you're not ready to see. All they can do is keep pointing and hope that eventually you pause long enough to actually look, to see where you actually are instead of where you think you are, to recognise what you've already become instead of what you think you need to become. So here's what you do with this information. You stop assuming the destination is far. You stop convincing yourself you have miles to go. You start actually checking, whether you might already be close, whether the change you're waiting for might have already happened, whether the understanding you're seeking might already be yours. You look at yourself now, not through the lens of who you think you should be, but through clear eyes. Just what's actually here, what's actually true, what's actually present. And you might be surprised. You might find you're not who you were. You might notice changes you didn't realise had occurred. You might see that you've been growing all along, just not in the ways you expected. You also stop dismissing simple solutions. Stop assuming the answer must be complicated because the problem feels complicated. Start considering that maybe, just maybe, the solution is simpler than you think, closer than you think, maybe even already in your hand, waiting for you to recognise it. And you practice this kind of seeing, not once, but continuously, because you'll forget. You'll fall back into the pattern of thinking you're far from where you need to be. You'll get caught up in the fantasy of the destination and lose sight of present reality. That's normal. That's how it works. But each time you remember to check, each time you pause to actually see where you are, you get better at recognising proximity, better at noticing when you're close, better at seeing what's already here. Eventually, something shifts. you start living more from recognition and less from striving, more from seeing what is and less from imagining what should be, more from acknowledging what you've already become and less from trying to become something else. And in that shift, you discover something profound. You were never really travelling. You were always here. The journey was just the time it took to recognise that. You're closer than you think. Right now, to whatever you're seeking, to whatever shift you need, to whatever understanding you're after, check and see. Actually look, you might be standing in it without knowing. You might have already arrived and just haven't noticed. The final step might not be a step at all, just recognition, just seeing, just finally noticing what's been true all along. If this video changed something in you, write in the comments, I'm already here. Write it as your recognition of where you actually stand. Nobody